The transport vessel descended through Terravale's amber clouds, its hull gleaming like a predator's scales. Thomas Reeves stood among 17 other children in the colony's central square, his small hand clutching a worn photograph of his parents. Around them, hundreds of colonists had gathered, their faces etched with grief they dared not voice too loudly. The Draconis overseer, a minor official with bronze scales and calculating yellow eyes, walked slowly past each child. His claws clicked against the stone ground with every step. Thomas watched him approach, fighting the tremor in his knees. His mother had told him to be brave this morning, even as tears streamed down her face. "These will do," the overseer announced in heavily accented human speech. "Lord Zephyrax expects quality, not quantity. The Dragon Lord does not appreciate disappointment." Thomas barely heard the words. He was staring at the massive citadel floating in the sky above them, a structure so impossibly large it seemed to defy the laws of physics he had learned in school. Crystalline towers jutted from its base, and energy shields shimmered around its perimeter like soap bubbles made of starlight. The journey upward felt both eternal and instantaneous. Thomas pressed his face against the transport window, watching his home shrink below. He could see the agricultural domes where his father worked, the schoolhouse where he had learned to read, the river where he caught fish with his friends. All of it becoming smaller and smaller until it was just a collection of dots on a brown and green world. When the transport docked inside the citadel, the temperature dropped noticeably. Thomas and the other children were herded through corridors so vast that their footsteps echoed like whispers in a canyon. Servants, other humans, other aliens Thomas did not recognize, moved silently along the walls, their eyes downcast. The throne room took Thomas's breath away. It stretched upward for at least 50 meters, with walls of dark stone inlaid with precious metals that formed intricate patterns. At the far end, upon a throne carved from a single massive crystal, sat Lord Zephyrax. Thomas had seen pictures of the Draconis before, but nothing prepared him for the reality. Zephyrax was enormous, easily 4 times the height of a grown human, with scales that shifted between deep blue and purple depending on how the light struck them. His wings, folded against his back, could have wrapped around a small house. His eyes glowed with an ancient intelligence that made Thomas feel naked and exposed. One by one, the children were presented. Most trembled. Several cried. A few fainted from sheer terror. The overseer announced each child's name, age, and skills. Zephyrax barely seemed to pay attention, occasionally nodding or waving a dismissive claw. Then it was Thomas's turn. Thomas Reeves, 8 years old, adequate marks in mathematics and literature. The overseer droned. Thomas stepped forward. He should have been terrified. Part of him was. But another part, the part that had always gotten him in trouble for asking too many questions, was overwhelmingly curious. He had read every book in Terravale's small library about the Draconis' empire. He knew their history, their legends, their art. And now he stood before one of their legendary dragon lords. Zephyrax's glowing eyes focused on him with sudden intensity. The dragon lord leaned forward slightly, and Thomas felt the weight of that gaze like a physical pressure. "You do not shake like the others," Zephyrax observed. His voice was deep, resonant, like thunder rolling across distant mountains. He spoke perfect human English, without any accent. Thomas swallowed hard. "I am afraid, my lord, but I am also curious." A sound rumbled from Zephyrax's chest. It took Thomas a moment to realize the dragon lord was laughing. "Curious? About what, small one?" "About everything, my lord. About your citadel. About how it floats. About what the symbols on your walls mean. About—" Thomas caught himself, realizing he was babbling. Zephyrax tilted his massive head, studying Thomas like a jeweler examining an unexpected gemstone. "Tell me, Thomas Reeves, what would you do if I gave you a choice? Serve in my kitchens or answer a riddle?" Thomas did not hesitate. "The riddle, my lord. And if you fail, the punishment will be severe. Then I will try not to fail." Zephyrax's eyes gleamed brighter. He asked his riddle, an ancient Draconis puzzle about honor and sacrifice. Thomas thought carefully, remembering a similar logic problem from one of his books. He answered slowly, explaining his reasoning. The throne room fell absolutely silent. Then Zephyrax rose from his throne, his full height making several children gasp in terror. He descended the steps with surprising grace for such a massive creature and stopped directly before Thomas. "This one," Zephyrax announced to his assembled court, "stays with me. He shall be educated as one of my own." 10 years transformed the frightened boy into something remarkable. Thomas stood before the grand observation window of his chambers, now nearly as tall as an adult human, his shoulders broad from combat training. Behind him, data screens displayed complex star charts and diplomatic treaties he had been studying since dawn. The sunrise over the Citadel's western gardens painted everything in shades of gold and crimson. A sharp knock interrupted his concentration. Princess Kirith entered without waiting for permission, as she always did. She had grown, too, her scales now a brilliant emerald green that marked her as approaching maturity. Her wings, still developing, rustled with barely contained energy. "Father wants you in the war room," she said, switching effortlessly between Draconis and human speech. "The council is challenging your latest proposal again." Thomas sighed and grabbed his formal robes, the ones that marked him as a prince of House Zephyrax. The blue and silver fabric still felt strange against his skin, even after all these years. "Let me guess. Lord Vex called it naive human sentimentality." "Actually, he called it dangerous revolutionary nonsense," Kirith replied with a sharp-toothed grin. "I thought that showed creative improvement on his part." They walked together through corridors Thomas now knew better than the streets of his childhood home. Servants bowed as they passed, though Thomas noticed some still looked uncertain about showing respect to a human. He had grown accustomed to the stares, the whispers, the occasional insult muttered just loud enough for him to hear. The war room was already filled with Zephyrax's advisors when they arrived. Thomas took his place at the strategy table, standing among beings 3 times his size. He had learned early that confidence mattered more than physical stature in these gatherings. Zephyrax dominated the head of the table, his presence still as commanding as that first day Thomas had met him. But Thomas could now read the subtle shifts in his scale coloration, the slight movements of his wings that indicated mood. The dragon lord was amused about something. "Prince Thomas," Zephyrax began, his voice formal for the benefit of the council, "you have proposed restructuring our trade agreements with the Kelter systems. Explain your reasoning to those who question it." Thomas activated the holographic display, showing economic models he had spent weeks developing. The current extraction model provides short-term gains but creates long-term instability. If we instead invest in infrastructure and allow the Kelter greater economic autonomy, our projections show a 40% increase in sustainable revenue over 20 years. "They are conquered peoples," Lord Vex interjected, his red scales bristling. "We do not invest in them. They serve us." "They serve reluctantly," Thomas countered, keeping his voice level. "Reluctant servants become rebels. Partners become allies. The mathematics supports partnership. The human speaks of mathematics," Vex sneered. Perhaps he should remember that his own people are among those conquered. The room fell silent. It was a direct challenge, an attempt to remind everyone that Thomas was not truly one of them. Thomas felt Kira tense beside him, ready to defend him, but he placed a subtle hand on the table in a gesture she recognized. He would handle this himself. "I remember every day, Lord Vex," Thomas said quietly. "I remember because I understand both perspectives. That understanding is not weakness. It is strategy." Zephyrax's scales shifted to a pleased purple. "Well spoken. The proposal is approved. We will begin with the Kelter systems as a pilot program." After the meeting, Thomas found Zephyrax alone in his private library, surrounded by texts older than human civilization. The Dragon Lord was reading a human book, one Thomas recognized as a gift he had given him years ago. "You still face opposition," Zephyrax observed without looking up. "I always will," Thomas replied, settling into a chair designed for beings much larger than himself. "I am the evidence that your empire can change." "Is that what you think you are?" Zephyrax closed the book, his ancient eyes focusing on Thomas with paternal warmth. "An experiment in change?" Thomas hesitated. "I think I am trying to be a bridge between what was and what could be." Zephyrax was quiet for a long moment. I lost a son once, centuries before you were born. He questioned everything, challenged every tradition, wanted to remake the Empire into something better. I was too proud then, too certain of the old ways. I refused to listen. His voice carried weight of profound regret. When I saw you in that tribute line, answer my riddle with such earnest cleverness, I saw a second chance. Thomas felt his throat tighten. I want to visit Terravale, to see my parents, my home, to see what has become of them. Then you shall go, Zephyrax decided. But Thomas, understand that you may not like what you find. The empire you are trying to change still operates by old rules in many places. I know, Thomas said. That is exactly why I need to see it. The shuttle touched down on Terravale's landing pad with a hiss of hydraulics. Thomas stepped out wearing simple clothes instead of his princely robes, wanted to see his home without the barrier of status. The air smelled different than he remembered, metallic and stale. The agricultural domes in the distance looked poorly maintained, their surfaces dulled by years of neglect. His parents barely recognized him at first. His mother dropped the basket she was carrying, vegetables spilling across the floor of their small dwelling. His father simply stared, mouth open, as if seeing a ghost. Then they were embracing him, crying, asking 1,000 questions all at once. "You have grown so tall," his mother whispered, touching his face as if confirming he was real. "We thought we had lost you forever." Thomas spent the evening listening to their stories, and each one made his chest tighten with anger he struggled to contain. The new overseer, Commander Vex, cousin of Lord Vex from the council, had tripled work quotas. Food rations had been cut. Medical supplies were withheld as punishment for minor infractions. Children were taken as tribute younger and younger, some as young as 5 years old. "Can you help us?" his father asked quietly. "You have influence now, do you not? Everyone knows you were raised by Lord Zephyrax himself." "I will try," Thomas promised, though the words felt inadequate. The next morning, Thomas requested an audience with Commander Vex. The overseer's compound sat on the highest hill in the colony, a fortress of metal and stone that seemed designed to remind humans of their place. Guards escorted Thomas through corridors lined with weapons and trophies taken from conquered worlds. Commander Vex lounged on a platform, his copper scales gleaming in artificial light. He was smaller than most Draconis Thomas had met, which perhaps explained his cruelty. Small predators often compensated with excessive aggression. The pet human, Vex drawled, not bothering to rise. "I heard Zephyrax keeps you as an amusement. Does he make you perform tricks?" Thomas kept his expression neutral, though fury burned in his chest. "I am Prince Thomas of House Zephyrax. I am here to conduct an inspection of this colony's administration." "Prince," Vex laughed, a harsh sound like rocks grinding together. "You are tribute, dressed up tribute, perhaps, but tribute nonetheless. You have no authority here. Then you refuse an official inspection from a member of the ruling house?" "I refuse nothing because there is nothing to refuse. You are not Draconis. You will never be Draconis." Vex's eyes narrowed. "Now leave before I have you thrown out." Thomas left, but not before his trained eye caught several details. Financial records left carelessly visible on a data pad, guard shift patterns, security protocols that seemed oddly lax for such a supposedly important official. Commander Vex was either supremely confident or supremely foolish. Over the next 3 days, Thomas investigated quietly. He spoke with human workers, documenting their testimonies. He accessed public records, noting discrepancies in resource allocation. He discovered that Vex was selling colony resources on black markets, pocketing profits meant for infrastructure and keeping populations deliberately weakened to prevent rebellion. On his final night, Thomas sat with his parents one last time. "I have to return to the Citadel, but I promise you things will change." His mother held his hand tightly. "You have become someone important, Thomas, but do not forget you are also human. Do not forget us." "I could never forget," Thomas assured her. "Everything I do is for people like you." The journey back to the Citadel gave Thomas time to organize his evidence and prepare his presentation. Zephyrax listened in silence as Thomas laid out documentation of Vex violations, his voice steady despite the anger underneath. "This is not an isolated case," Thomas concluded. "Commander Vex operates this way because the system allows it, because no one checks on these distant colonies, because conquered peoples are seen as resources to exploit rather than lives to protect." Zephyrax studied the evidence carefully. "You understand what you're asking? Reforming the tribute system would challenge centuries of tradition. It would make enemies of powerful houses. I understand. But I also understand that empires built on cruelty eventually crumble. History proves it again and again." "You sound like my son," Zephyrax said softly. "The one I lost." He said similar things. The Dragon Lord straightened, his scales shifting to determine crimson. "Very well. I will call a council session. You will present your case and your proposal for reform. They will not listen to a human," Thomas warned. "Then I will make them listen." Zephyrax placed one massive claw gently on Thomas's shoulder. "You are Prince Thomas of House Zephyrax. It is time the Empire remembered what that means." 3 days later, at the state dinner before the council session, Zephyrax collapsed, his scales turning ashen gray. Poison, the physicians determined, and suspicion immediately fell on the human prince who had most to gain from the Dragon Lord's death. The prison cell was surprisingly comfortable, but Thomas barely noticed. He sat on the stone bench, replaying the dinner in his mind. The moment Zephyrax had reached for his cup, the way the Dragon Lord's eyes had widened in recognition of what was happening, the terrible sound of his collapse. Thomas had rushed forward to help, and that action now damned him in the eyes of many. Princess Kirith appeared at the energy barrier that sealed his cell. Her scales were dark with distress, her wings drooping. "The council meets tomorrow. Lord Malachar is pushing for immediate execution. He says keeping you alive risks the stability of the Empire." "Malachar," Thomas repeated thoughtfully. The elderly Dragon Lord had opposed every reform proposal, had spoken most viciously against Thomas's rise to status. "How is your father?" "Alive, but weak. The physicians say the poison was void thorn extract, extremely rare and expensive. Only high-ranking nobles have access to it." Kirith pressed closer to the barrier. "Thomas, I know you did not do this. I am investigating, but I need time." "How much time do we have?" "Not enough." The trial took place in the Grand Council Chamber, a circular room where the Empire's most powerful Dragon Lords gathered. Thomas stood in the center, unarmed and wearing plain clothes, while 40 Draconis nobles watched from elevated platforms surrounding him. He felt like prey in an arena. Lord Malachar presided in Zephyrax's absence. He was ancient, his scales almost black with age, his eyes sharp despite his centuries. "Thomas Reeves, you stand accused of attempted regicide. How do you answer?" "Not guilty, Lord Malachar. I have spent 10 years learning Draconi's law and honor. I would never betray the one who gave me everything." "Pretty words from a human," sneered Lord Vex from his platform. "But we all know you push for reforms that would diminish our power. With Lord Zephyrax dead, those reforms die with him. Then I would have no reason to kill him," Thomas countered. "My proposals only had support because of Zephyrax's backing. His death weakens my position, not strengthens it." Malachar's tail swished with irritation. "You were seated next to him. You had opportunity. You had potential motive. What else do we need?" Thomas took a deep breath, summoning every lesson in rhetoric and law he had learned. "You need evidence. Under Draconi's legal code, specifically the Accords of the Third Dynasty, accusations of treason require proof beyond circumstantial opportunity. The poison was void thorn extract, yes? That substance requires special storage and handling. Check my quarters. Check my belongings. You will find nothing." "Already done," Malachar admitted. "Nothing was found. But absence of evidence is not evidence of absence." "Then investigate who had access to void thorn extract. The medical archives keep strict records. Only nobles of the highest rank can legally possess it." Thomas let his gaze sweep across the council. "How many of you have access?" The chamber erupted in angry roars and protests. Malachar slammed his staff against the floor, demanding order. "You dare accuse this council?" "I accuse no one. I simply asked for the same thorough investigation you would conduct for any Draconis accused of such a crime. Thomas kept his voice steady. Or does my being human mean I deserve less justice? Before Malachar could respond, Kirith entered the chamber, moving with urgent purpose. I request permission to present new evidence. Denied, Malachar said quickly. The trial is nearly concluded. Under the Accords of the Third Dynasty, which Prince Thomas correctly cited, new evidence must be heard before judgment, Kirith countered, using Thomas's own legal reference against the council. Or do we ignore our own laws when convenient? Malachar's scales darkened with fury, but he could not refuse without revealing bias. Speak, then, quickly. Kirith activated a holographic display. I investigated the medical archives. 11 council members have access to void thorn extract. I then cross-referenced security footage from the storage facility. The display showed a figure entering the secure vault. This was recorded 2 days before the dinner. Notice the gait pattern, the wing configuration. The image was unclear, but Thomas recognized silhouette. So did several other council members, judging by their reactions. This proves nothing, Malachar interrupted. The footage is too degraded to identify anyone. Perhaps, Kirith agreed, but I also access communication logs. Someone sent encrypted messages to Commander Vex on Terravale, coordinating Thomas's inspection visit to occur precisely before the council session, creating the appearance of motive. She looked directly at Malachar. Those messages originated from your private chambers. The chamber exploded into chaos. Malachar rose to his full height, wings spreading. Lies. Fabrications designed to protect the human. Then submit to a true scan, Thomas challenged. If you are innocent, you have nothing to fear. But Malachar did not respond to the challenge. Instead, he made a gesture, and suddenly alarms blared throughout the citadel. Armed soldiers, Malachar's personal guard, flooded into the chamber. This council is dissolved, Malachar declared. The Empire requires stronger leadership than a dying dragon lord and his pet human. By ancient right of challenge, I claim the throne. Thomas realized with cold clarity that the assassination attempt was never just about removing Zephyrax. It was the opening move in a coup, and now they stood at the center of it, surrounded by hostile forces. Kirith moved to stand beside Thomas, her claws extending. Whatever happens now, we face it together. The battle for the Citadel lasted 3 brutal hours. Loyal guards fought Malachar's soldiers in the corridors, while Thomas and Kirith escaped through maintenance tunnels Thomas had mapped during his years of curious exploration. They reached the docking bay where a handful of ships waited, crewed by officers still faithful to Zephyrax. Get Prince Thomas to safety, Kirith commanded the captain, a scarred veteran named Thorax. I am not running, Thomas said firmly. Malachar expects me to flee. We need to do the unexpected. Within days, the Empire fractured. Noble houses chose sides based on ancient alliances and personal ambitions. Malachar controlled the throne world and its immediate systems, but Zephyrax's reputation had earned loyalty across many sectors. Thomas found himself given command of a small fleet, 12 ships against Malachar's 100. The first battle taught Thomas that he could not win through conventional warfare. Draconi's tactics relied on overwhelming force and frontal assault. But Thomas had studied human military history alongside alien strategies. He knew stories of smaller forces defeating larger ones through cleverness rather than strength. At the Kelter Systems, where Thomas's reforms had already begun, he split his fleet into 3 groups. When Malachar's forces arrived expecting a direct engagement, they found empty space. Thomas's ship struck from 3 different vectors, targeting supply lines and communication relays rather than warships. The enemy fleet fell into disarray, unable to coordinate effectively. Word of the victory spread quickly. More importantly, Thomas sent a message to every tributary world in the sector. This war is not just about who sits on the throne. It is about what kind of empire we want to be. Help us. And regardless of the outcome, I promise reforms will continue. You will have representation. You will have justice. His father was among the first to respond. The humans of Terravale, remembering Thomas's visit and his promises, organized an intelligence network. They fed information about Malakar's troop movements, supply caches, and weak points. Other tributary species followed their example. Suddenly, Thomas's small fleet had eyes and ears across dozens of worlds. For more battles followed, each one through strategy rather than strength. Thomas used feints and misdirection, hit-and-run tactics, and psychological warfare. He broadcast messages highlighting Malakar's crimes and broken honor codes, eroding support among fence-sitting nobles. But Malakar played his final card with ruthless efficiency. He captured Zephyrax from the medical facility where the Dragon Lord was recovering, too weak to resist. The message was clear: surrender or watch your adoptive father die. Thomas stood on his flagship's bridge, studying the tactical display of the throne world's defenses. Kira stood beside him, her scales dim with worry. "It is a trap," Thorax warned. "He wants you to attack. The defenses are too strong." "Then we give him what he expects," Thomas said, pulling up schematics he had studied years ago during his education. "But not where he expects it." The plan was audacious, bordering on suicidal. Thomas's fleet launched a full assault on the throne world's northern shields, drawing every defender to that sector. Meanwhile, Thomas led a team of 5, including Kirith and 2 loyal commandos, in a small stealth ship, entering through an ancient maintenance access point Thomas had discovered in archived blueprints. They moved through the palace like ghosts, avoiding patrols using routes Thomas remembered from his childhood there. Every corridor held memories of lessons learned and conversations shared. Now those same halls echoed with the sounds of civil war. They found Zephyrax in the throne room, chained with energy bonds designed to contain beings of his power. Malakar stood before the throne itself, waiting. He had known they would come. "The pet human arrives," Malakar said, his voice dripping with contempt. "So predictable, so emotional, so weak." "Weakness would be needing an army to face one human," Thomas replied, stepping forward. "I challenge you, Malakar. Single combat, as is your right under the ancient codes you claim to uphold." Malakar laughed. "You cannot possibly." "Are you refusing an honor challenge?" Thomas interrupted. "In front of witnesses? You, who claim to represent traditional values." The Dragon Lord's laughter died. Refusing would destroy his legitimacy. "Very well. When I kill you, perhaps Zephyrax will finally understand that humans are not capable of greatness." The fight was brief and completely one-sided. Malakar was larger, stronger, armed with natural weapons Thomas could never match. But Thomas was not trying to win through combat. He was buying time. As Malakar advanced, Thomas spoke loudly, his words broadcast through communication devices Kirith had activated. "You poisoned Zephyrax because he dared to treat a human as worthy. You started a civil war because you could not accept change. You broke every honor code you claim to cherish. Words will not save you." Malakar roared, lunging forward. Thomas dodged barely and continued. "Under the Accords of the Seventh Dynasty, a Dragon Lord who acts without honor can be challenged by any member of the noble houses, even an adopted one." Malakar's claw caught Thomas's shoulder, sending him sprawling. Blood flowed freely. But Thomas smiled because he heard what Malakar could not yet, the sound of ships landing outside. His fleet had broken through. Noble houses that had remained neutral were broadcasting their support. The tide was turning. Zephyrax, gathering his remaining strength, shattered his energy bonds with a roar that shook the palace. He rose to his full height, towering over Malakar. "You have lost. Surrender with honor or die without it." Malakar chose to fight, and it was over quickly. In the aftermath, as medical teams treated Thomas's wounds, Zephyrax formally presented him to the assembled noble houses. "This is Prince Thomas of House Zephyrax, who led us through darkness with wisdom beyond his years, who proved that greatness has nothing to do with species, and everything to do with character." Years later, Thomas stood on Terravale, watching his children play in gardens that now thrived under fair governance. His father worked beside him as an advisor. His mother taught in schools that welcomed all species. The empire had not become perfect, but it had become better. Kira visited often, now ruling her own sector with the same principles Thomas had fought for. and Zephyrax in his final years, told anyone who would listen about the tribute who became a prince, and the prince who changed an empire.